Federal Housing Finance Agency Director Bill Pulte saying he's going to hold a press conference tomorrow morning with what he says is new information connected to Fed Governor Lisa Cook's mortgages. Meanwhile, Cook's legal team blasting the Trump administration in a series of new court filings. Cook is asserting that the White House lacks valid grounds to fire her for, quote, cause. Joining us right now with the latest is Scott Alvarez, who served as general counsel to the Fed Board of Governors. He's now an adjunct professor with the George Washington University Law School. Good morning to you. We also heard from her effectively saying that she didn't commit mortgage fraud. It's the first sort of full-throated defense, though limited in terms of any detail. Do you think she's supposed to come out and say something very specific about these allegations or not?
So I don't think she's set that up in this court case. Right now, she wants a decision based just on the president's order and what he used to make that order, which is simply the allegation from Bill Pulte. She's saying that she was denied due process, and so she's looking for another proceeding to have the facts come out on the mortgages, if there is indeed any issue there.
The reason I ask is there's the court, and then there's the court of public opinion, and how much you think that matters in this type of context, given the role that she's in.
So the court of public opinion is very important. She's in a tough spot because if she's able to stay on the FOMC for its next meeting and she votes to lower rates, there's going to always be the question, is that based on the data or is that to preserve her position? On the other hand, if she votes against raising rates, or lowering rates rather, if she votes to raise rates, then folks may wonder what her basis is for that. Is that retaliation for the president's attempt to get her off the board? She's in a tough spot that way. I don't know if putting more information out will solve that problem for her. It's probably a little more complicated than we all think, and that may be why she's not issuing a special release of information.
What do you think about the strength of the president's case to fire her?
So I think that the allegation is not cause. No court has found that a simple allegation without a basis to it is in fact a cause. It'll be interesting to see what the Supreme Court thinks about that. I think what's going on right now is very important because she's asking for a TRO and then a summary judgment, which means TRO is not appealable. Summary judgment would be appealable, but that would be a case on the merits. The Department of Justice is asking for something different. They want to convert the TRO into a request for a preliminary injunction. That is appealable. If the court does that, then they could go directly to the Supreme Court or through the Court of Appeals to the Supreme Court to decide whether she can stay on the board meeting in September.
Scott, let me ask you a slightly different question. There was an interesting sort of component part of her filing, which is that she sued not only the White House and the president, but she sued the Fed itself, and she sued Jay Powell. And there's some people who've looked at that and said that's a way to try to protect the Fed and maybe even protect Jay Powell from making decisions that would have otherwise been adverse to her, or worse, putting him in a position, if he didn't do something related to her, that he could therefore be fired for cause. Can you speak to that sort of legal game going on, if that's what's happening?
Sure. I think it's natural that she should sue the board and Jay Powell as part of this action because she wants an order from the court that says to the Fed and to the chair, you can't remove me based on the president's letter. Let this play out in a court before you take action at the Fed. And that does protect her and her position because the Fed wouldn't act separately from the court. But it also does protect the Fed because then they'll have clear guidance from the court on what to do, whether she should stay or not stay.
Hey, Scott, that aspect makes sense to me, just the idea that, someone has a chance to prove their innocence, to prove they're not guilty in a situation like this. But based on what we've seen, if the evidence is true from what we've seen from Bill Pulte, it's pretty hard to justify having 3 homes where you said each is your primary residence and you've been renting some of them out.
So that is a little more complicated than it sounds because The real question isn't, anybody who's been through the mortgage application process knows there's a lot of information that is provided to the bank, and that information can change during the process of getting a mortgage.
Yeah, but I also know, as somebody who owns multiple homes,
that
the bank wants to know if it's your first or second, because if it's not your primary house, you're going to have to pay a higher rate, because you are far more likely to walk away from that investment than a home you're living in.
People keep saying it's complicated. It's easy to make mistakes. She's deciding on monetary policy. I'm sorry it's complicated, but, you know, you got a big job here.
True, but think of a person who has, say, a congressman or anybody working in Washington that has a primary home in some state, and then they get a job in D.C. that's going to be temporary. They need a place to live there. Some states provide that if you live 180 days or more in a particular home, you have to declare that as a primary residence. But you may already have a mortgage that says you have a primary residence somewhere else.
But she did. Those two mortgages she took out were within 2 weeks of each other. I can understand there are some circumstances. For example, if you are serving in the military, you can do that. You can buy a home and list it as your primary if you're doing it for, let's say, an older relative or a child with disabilities. There are some reasons for that. If it were that simple, why hasn't she just said that instead of going through this entire rigmarole and saying it was a clerical error?
Yeah, I don't know the reasons for her approach to what she's saying publicly. I just know that there are situations where this could be, you know, it's a question of what the banks know and what she's told the banks, which is more than what's on the application. We'll eventually find this out, but that hasn't been revealed so far.